Welcome to our session on audio and lighting design for immersive work. My name is Andy Barnes. I'm one of the co-founders of IEN, and I also am a production manager with a company called Entourage. So I know a little bit about this, but I've got sort of some people who are over so much amazing immersive work across the genres and the spectrum that I think we've got a massive bit of wealth of knowledge here that we can hopefully sort of pick from. Let's just introduce people on the panel. I think I was going to let people sort of go through and introduce yourselves. Who are you? What do you do? What sort of work you curate? How do you get here?
Great. Hi everyone. Adam Povey. I do lighting, design, production, and head of lighting for some companies where we take over and look after all lighting elements. Started doing outdoor street theatre and then went through the West End theatre and that side of things with the touring, and then landed after doing Regent's Park open air theatre for 5 years, doing immersive entertainment, everything from Secret Cinema, where we know some of these gents from, to outdoor Christmas trails for Kew Gardens and Harry Potter trail. And yeah, just all immersive stuff from small to large. The small stuff like Peaky Blinders and Doctor Who, and the intimate settings to the large scale open air.
Luke?
I'm Luke Swaffield. I'm a sound designer at a company called Autograph Sound, based in the UK. We do a lot of large-scale theatre and events. I've been working in the industry professionally for about 20 years, and I've been at Autograph full-time for about 15 of those years. My background as sound designer started in theatre, doing both straight plays and musicals in the West End, on tour and around the world. And then I kind of got involved into this dark, murky world of immersive experiential entertainment. Done a lot of work with Adam and these fine gentlemen at Secret Cinema. And I've also, in more recent years, gone beyond Secret Cinema and started working with other producers, such as working with Immersive Everywhere, designing Doctor Who and Peaky Blinders. I also work with the Path Entertainment Group, doing a lot of their kind of experiential escape rooms like Monopoly Life Size, Saw, and other projects that we got coming up in 2024.
Hello, I'm Emmet O'Donnell. I'm also a sound designer. I'm freelance. I started in this industry. Well, I came from the film industry, doing sound for that, and I had a chance meeting with Fabian Riggle in about 2011, and he brought me into Secret Cinema in the early days.
That's a proper sliding doors moment, that is, isn't it?
It was a real sliding doors moment, but no, it's just thinking about this and designing audio. It's been a real journey for me. I've been doing it since the very early days, so it's really interesting to see how we designed it then, how we approach it now.
And Seb?
Hello, I'm Seb Blaber. I was a freelance lighting designer and then moved to own Unlock Vision Entertainment, which we specialise in all the theme park market. So I've done the various theme parks, the lighting, sound design, set design, how we sort of do a mixed bag. I've started doing attractions more, some dark rides, so a bit different to these two, but even though I come from a theatre background, I've also done more of the attraction side of things as well.
One of the things that, having been involved in quite a few production processes and design processes with immersive work, that struck me is that the process of designing this work can be very different to what's some of the traditional genres, especially in theatre, are like. And also I've noticed, it's clear that people are working it out as they go along. It is an evolving thing, or people trying to work out what is the best way to develop the audio and lighting creatively for these shows. If I was to put that as a question for you guys in terms of what are the ways that, or how do you approach developing an immersive project versus something like a theatre project or something else more traditional?
Yeah, I think the big difference from coming from the theatre world into the immersive world is that you get given the black box theatre and you know where the flybars are and you know where substage is, and it's very prescriptive. The difference with the immersive stuff is that we can do anything anywhere, which is great for the imagination and not necessarily the budget. But yes, how we nail stuff down is the interesting one, and how we do that along the way. So we'll have, it depends on which part of the process we get brought in on. We like to be brought in as soon as possible and be involved a lot more every step of the way. So if we were doing a theatre show in the West End, we wouldn't need to be in meetings every week, but we would want to, in an immersive world, because things change so quickly, to be involved in every step of the way, because one knock-on for scenic has a knock-on for or can have a big knock on for lighting and sound and control and everything along the way. So being involved in it early enough and on top of every element is a big difference.
I think that's right. It's that kind of integrated approach is kind of the big difference. I know generally we'll spend months developing these kind of shows. Never enough time, but always a lot more time, a lot more meat. I think Tim McQuillan, when he was downstairs this morning, summed it up best. If I choose to move a speaker, that has a knock-on effect for set, has a knock-on effect for lighting in perhaps the same way that it maybe wouldn't in a conventional theatre standpoint, I guess. Yeah.
We're working with not just ourselves, it's with set design, it's with creative. And as you said, Adam, the earlier you come in, we're a lot more effective then, and we can be a lot more proactive with our set design and actually highlight the things we really want to highlight so that we really make a great show.
And just to say, like 5 years ago, we've been doing Immersive for a long time, but 5 years ago we would hire the lighting rig and it would be installed in a theatrical way. And now everything's trying to be integrated and built into sets. So it's not just a lighting rig like up in here thrown on top of the set. We're building everything into, which is great because we're not meant to notice it and we don't want anyone to see it, but we need to be involved in all of those conversations, and the schedule is key and all of that because it's so much more integrated now, which is a good thing in my opinion. But
yeah, it could even be props, right? Like
For sure.
We can use a telephone. You can pick up a telephone and have a conversation with somebody on the other end. It could be a television that suddenly comes to life and you get a news broadcast or some kind of message, something to do with the show.
Yeah, public want more immersive and interactive elements to shows and experiences, and it's about how you do it so it runs 2,000 times a night without breaking.
How's that work from your world, Seb? Or if it's more that sort of attractions, what are the timelines that you usually try and work on in those projects, and how early do you get involved, and how much of a say do you get?
So it's quite hard in the theme park world. Sometimes it can be extremely short, like we're talking like 4 or 5 weeks to like months to years. There's obviously no script as it sense, so it's normally 2 stages, like a theme book concept stage and a theme book, like general theme book with everything in. Quite often a lighting designer, sound designer aren't involved in those like actual creative decisions early on, unless you get really early on, like years down the line, and then you have to adapt your designs to fit that like image. So there'll be like concept images, which then you have to change your design to sort of match that, and then allowing your design to come into it. So when you're actually on site, you can adapt your own design into what that overall design is. So everyone's working the same concept book.
Is there a world in which that sort of theme park world is a little bit more like the agency world, where everything is dictated by the render? So the designer who does the render, that's what everyone's shooting for.
Yeah, so everyone is working off that concept book. So everyone is trying to be aligned. Obviously, things do change, but changes are a lot harder to make closer to when it's actually installing. So because you're working with more contractors, more like just literally general electricians, rather than like if it was we used to do things then a more like the theatre way, where you could just we can just maybe like you were saying, it's not as easy to just do that anymore. An electrician just doesn't understand why you want to move a light meter, but it's just those relationships as well.
It's interesting because I've never seen a render for an immersive theatre piece yet.
Are you working on the wrong shows?
Yes, that's possibly true. I mean, one of the things that in some of the immersive work I've been involved in is when people who come from a theatre background come into it, the one thing they find really difficult is that there's not a script. And certainly from a lighting and sound point of view, you almost, they keep kind of going, how am I meant to do a design if I haven't got a script? And how do you guys work around that as a sort of knowing what you're designing for when it's such an evolving narrative thing?
I think, certainly big adjustment for me. I think certainly the approach I take is very much to think about the location. So what are the different spaces? And we haven't, if I'm doing a theatre show, I can read a script and I can go, there's a doorbell upstage left, whatever. Not quite that simple in an immersive show. So my approach is very much to look at the different location. I work out a plan to fill that location. I work out the sound of that location, and I'll just make a big toolbox of stuff that might suit that location, whether that be like the Garrison Bar in Peaky Blinders or, Unit HQ in Doctor Who, and just make a whole load of stuff that fits within that world, so that then as the show gets developed through rehearsals and, you know, the cast come on site and start playing and discovering things, I've kind of got a big toolbox of stuff that I can respond to really quickly is sort of how I approach that, yeah.
Preparation is essential when you're doing an immersive show. My focus is the audio content, and the same as that. I have folders and folders of stuff that I think they'll want. So if it's easier, if it's an IP, like if it's something like Stranger Things, you can watch the show. You'll have an idea what's coming up. They'll want a Demogorgon. They're going to want various other creeks. They're going to want spooky places. So you can have all that prepared straight away. And then, like you say, once they're actually, the cast are in there working away, they say, we really need this sound or something to happen. You at least have a placeholder, and then you can refine it later.
I mean, they'll still find something that you would never have thought of in a million years.
Naturally. 100%.
I've downloaded this thing off YouTube.
Yeah.
Can it be like that?
Yeah. But certainly, like, if it's an IP, it's a bit easier. If it's something that's brand, like fresh IP, again, you just have to use your imagination. What would I want? What would I expect? You'll have a rough idea. They'll tell you, you know, it's a lift and you sneak into a vault. So, you know, that gives you something to go with. And then you think, well, what's that supposed to feel like? What's that supposed to sound like? And then you can, you know, start from there.
5 years ago, when we were just adding a theatrical light, we could add it last minute, and it was really easy, and no one, because there was rigging up there was truss up there, we could get a light, add it. But now we need to be holding designers to plans a lot earlier, because it isn't just, we can't just add a light to a thing. It's built in. The speaker grills are in the set wall. The light's built into the room. We literally can't just go and get a theatrical fixture and add it on, because it would look stupid. So it's holding people to decisions a lot earlier in the process, and then not changing the set design for 2 months before you open. But the problem with that is that we're still creating the show, and the set might need to change because an actor might need to come through a new door that they're putting in, but the door can't be there because there's something behind it, or, you know. So it's a newer way of working, which is the right way to go, but everyone needs to get on the same page at the same time, which is interesting.
How much of your world, Seb, is worked out in rehearsal like that, and how much of it is sort of a bit more planned, a bit more sort of rigid?
Zero, basically. There is hardly any rehearsal. Normally you hand over, like we just did a Halloween attraction where it's completely handed over before actors are even there. So you have to work quite early on with like the acting team, as it were, to know what they're going to do. And there's always that sign where you're still trying to work out, like in the sense of, you know, an actor's going to be there, and that's all in that theme book. So like, it's not really a script, like I said earlier. It's all in that visual, and everyone works from that thing. And then changes are like extremely hard to make.
And that's sort of where we're heading, right? Like that's what it feels like to me, is that we're heading more into the theme park, but with people that need to make changes and adapting all the time. So that's where, when we design a system and a rig, we try and do it so that it's as flexible as humanly possible. So even if someone says categorically this room is only ever going to be lit in blue, we put in RGBW tape so that we can make that change if suddenly someone comes in and says, oh, it's got to be red now.
I think, though, that is a key thing, certainly from my approach, is building in that flexibility, because, you know, what we have in the immersive theatre world is, you know, the final cast member, which is the audience. And until you kind of bring those audience members in, you know, depending on the show, whether it's 20 people going through in 15-minute blocks, or it's a secret cinema, we've got 1,200 people coming through, you never really know how they're going to respond. And I think that you know, whilst we're, you know, as Adam says, trying to build these rock solid systems that are built in, that are integrated, that are invisible, it's also allowing that flexibility. You know, I think we've all been involved in shows where halfway through previews we've had to take the really bold step of, you know, quite literally ripping up the timeline and starting again, because the audience just aren't responding in the way that we thought they would. And it's really difficult to predict that. And there'll always be people that will respond differently again, but, you know, allowing that flexibility to change as well is quite key with the systems and the design that you're putting together, I think. And that's, again, where the like toolbox of stuff comes in really handy when you make those decisions overnight, you know.
We do the same with the control side of things. So ultimately we keep it as flexible as we possibly can from start to finish. And actually, in a way, that's more flexible than the end product in the rooms. Because as Seb was saying, you can't move it all at the last minute.
Okay, if we were to try and have that sort of honest face-to-face conversation with a brand new design team that you're starting a brand new project with, and projects don't often start like this, but they probably should start like this, and, you know, there is someone in the room in a sort of lovely, fuzzy, cuddly way kind of going, how do we all get the best out of each other with the way they work, with the way, you know, how do you work How do you work? How do we interface these things? If you had a conversation with that designer to sort of say, for you to get the best out of me as a creative designer and for this show to be the very best that it can be, it would be great if you could work with me like this. What would you say to them?
I guess for me, it would be collaboration. That's the thing. I think these shows, it doesn't work to stay in your lane. Certainly the way I work, I'm forever talking with the line designer, the set designer. I think there are so many things, actually, well, we were saying this earlier in the day when we sat downstairs. It's like, the lights on their own don't make sense. The set on its own doesn't make sense. The set needs to be lit. It needs a sound design to help ground that location in. It might need smell, scent. It might need other kind of special effects. We had exactly this conversation on a show that was a transfer where the production manager, was coming on board new to an existing show. So I just find out, I just want to have individual departmental meetings as a kickoff. And we were, as a creative team, we were straight away like, no, that's not how we work. We have to have one big meeting all together because every individual element has to work together. So I think that'd be my big thing, is just collaborate and don't sort of put people in the lanes. If something's not working, we can all bring our problem-solving skills to the table and help fix it as well.
I think same things, like all sit around a table, right, and have a day where you discuss what wants to be achieved, how do we achieve it. Everything has a knock-on to everyone else. Everyone brings something to the table, and the projects that we've done that are, in my opinion, the best end result are those projects, rather than we do some no names that exactly that, like different people want to do different things, and we get brought on board and have individual meetings, and the end result isn't quite as good as everyone collaborating and sitting in a room together and brainstorming, and because ultimately someone will come up with a great idea that wasn't even on the cards and on the table at the start of the thing. And like Stranger Things that we did for Secret, like we didn't know where we were going with that for a long time until we all kept on talking about it and going through it, and we didn't end up doing a regular film screening. It was completely created for that project and that venue, and it worked very well.
Yeah, and pre-production we're having, a weekly meeting as well, and then daily meetings when we're actually there building it, just so that everyone's on the same page, because it is absolutely
Sometimes
key.
twice daily.
Sometimes twice daily.
Andy had one where he had 3 meetings a day.
But you do need to do that. Everyone needs to know what the other person is doing, because it's like you say, if they make a set change, we need to know about it, right? Or if they, something like that, if we're going to do a sound change, if we're going to move speakers, they need to know about it. Creative need to be able to communicate their ideas, and then somebody can flag that, oh, that could be problematic. And then we'll have to think, okay, well, how could we do it differently? And then we'll all agree on one thing.
And you need production in the room for that as well, because ultimately the production side of me goes, well, the fire alarm systems change, or the rack rooms change, or the electrical sign-off changes, because any one of those creative things has a knock-on to as creative as well as production.
And in your world, Seb, with these designers creating the renders at the top end, is there opportunity for you often to get him to sort of sit down with them and say, look, here's some ideas, here's some new kit that's out, or, we could do this, that wouldn't it be great? Do you get in at that high level at all?
Sometimes it really depends on the actual job. So sometimes you can be fully involved and you would help do those renders, and you can have input. Like communication is like the most important thing, like everyone said. It's all about talking to each other. And then sometimes it'll just be like a creative design studio will just do them somewhere and then go, this is what we're doing, and then you have to adapt to that. But you're still talking, but you just then use your basis of those images, but then you can just adapt your designs and still talk to every department to work out what you're going to do. So there's still flexibility there.
And how about, so we've obviously been involved in some quite sort of large scale stuff, but we started out doing very small scale stuff. For people in the room who sort of are doing the sort of, independent work, some of their first work, some of the early sort of, early career stuff, in terms of utilizing sound and lighting as a tool to create that immersion, do you have any sort of pointers or tips or sort of ways that you go about it if someone was coming to you with something that's quite, on that sort of level?
I think because I started out in the early days of Secret Cinema, and there really wasn't a lot of budget for things like sound, and there was no lighting and sound integration in the very beginning. I mean, a lot of the time, I think I said it earlier, sometimes it's a prop. Like we would have a hollowed out radio with a DVD player looping a CD and a speaker sat on top of it in the shell of a radio, and I would make a radio show for an hour that would loop, right? But it sold the room. It was almost enough, it was nearly enough to have a ticking clock or something and a speaker hidden behind a shelf. And they could even be standalone systems. So it depends what you're trying to do. Now a QLab license is what, Luke, $5 a day?
Yeah,
Something like that. I mean, we did a show with Swamp Motel. We had a QLab system that did link lighting and sound, but we used very cheap kit. It was an escape room part of it was in an elevator. So we had the kind of speaker that you would use in an elevator for about 30 quid. We had a transducer in the floor to give the mechanics, the rumbling of the elevator as it moved in the floor, 15 quid. We had a little Bluetooth anchor speaker, which was powered. But again, that was like, 20 quid. And we managed to make something quite cool. We did have other speakers as well hidden around to do other things. But, we didn't spend a fortune on that show. It was kind of an experiment in a way to see, what kind of show could we do. And there was a limit to the budget, but we managed to achieve a really great show. It got some good reviews for the sound, which I was happy with. And generally as a show, it was really good. So you don't need to have tons and tons of money to put on a good show, in my opinion. If you don't have the money, but you want to do something special and you're starting out, there's nothing wrong with a standalone system with an iPod playing in the corner. If it sells the room, if it sells the idea, if the story's good, the sound is there to support it. It depends what your idea is, I guess.
If it can just be on, it can be on, right? Don't overcomplicate. But I guess breaking it down by space or by section or by that's where we tend to start. So ultimately, it's really easy. I used to get a bit worried about doing the super large scale stuff coming from the theatre side, but actually, if you break it down as 20 studio shows in your head or on paper, actually, it's really easy. So we just see it as 20, like a Secret Cinema or the Harry Potter outdoor thing is 34 sections, and if you see each section as its own thing, it's like this room in this space, and it's really easy to install, design, think of a design for it and content. But if you saw it as a 2-mile long trail and the whole thing's show controlled and the whole thing's linked up, you'd be really worried and scared about it. But actually see it as 34 different little individual shows is super easy.
Yeah, I'd say that's exactly how I've done it, and think of it as room by room. It's 20 little shows. Some of those rooms might have sound goes on at the start of the day, sound goes off at the end of the day, which could you could buy a cheap MP3 player off Amazon for 20 quid, and a couple of PC speakers, and off you go. But actually that room, then scaling that up, that's even how we program the shows. Although both the lighting and the sound files look really complicated, it is essentially 20 rooms all combined into one with one big button. So just break it down into its component pieces and say thinking about what does that room need to do. Does it need an integrated system, or is it just a room in a house where a radio in the corner might actually be all you need? You don't have to overcomplicate it. You don't have to spend loads of money if you don't.
Well,
then the show doesn't call for it.
Some of them can be then easy and your cost-effective wins, and then some can be where you spend the money and time code a 5-minute sequence and because ultimately none of us are going to be able to ever do that on all of those spaces because it would break the bank. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think Adam just touched on a really interesting point. Obviously, no matter what show you're doing, whether it's a small little self-produced thing or a multi-million-pound Secret Cinema, the budget is never enough. That's just a fact. There is never enough money to do what you want to do. So one of the big things we do is actually kind of prioritizing, like, okay, what are our absolute must-haves? What come what may, must we deliver? What are our nice to haves, and kind of prioritize things like that. And it's the same certainly with me. I'm only one person. Same with me as well in my time. What are the big spaces? Well, the audience are only going to spend 2 minutes in this space, but they're going to spend half an hour in this space. So I'll prioritize that space, and that's where my time goes as well. So break it into manageable chunks, I guess, would be the.
What do you say?
Yeah, so everyone thinks theme parks have a lot of money, and it's like I've worked on theatre shows with a lot bigger budget than some of the theme park stuff we've done. But like you say over there, breaking it down, like if you did a ride with like 22 rooms, if you look at it over as an overall, you're going to go, that's quite intimidating. But just break it down to smaller rooms, treat each room, as it were, as its own show, and then you're sort of good to go, really. But it's just the breaking them down, I think. You can be quite swamped quite quickly if you go, oh my God, I got this whole thing to do. But if you break it down, like you said, it's a lot easier manageable.
And same in delivery, right? So I get as stressed to delivering a £100,000 project as we did the 42 million Potters last year. Like it's because we want the best result for the project rather than the money is not irrelevant at that point, but it's not my money. But it's about creating the best thing that you can create for the money, and you still don't have enough money, as was said, even on those other projects.
Amazing. But I just want to sort of recognise the fact that we're doing a panel about audio and license design for immersive work, and we're a panel of white middle-aged men, which is traditionally like, how a lot of people see that sector. It's unfortunate because we actually know some amazing female sound designers and female lighting designers. They were all busy, and we weren't. So that says something about the state of the industry at the moment. Tell us something, yeah. But this is something which I think everyone's become a lot more aware of in the last certainly the last 5, if not 10 years. Sort of diversity within our sector and within our speciality. And I'm certainly being sort of aware of a lot more sort of diverse cohort beginning to come through now in terms of just coming through the ranks and coming through getting opportunities. But what do you think we can do as a sector to create those pathways and create those routes through that people can get that experience, can get those opportunities and start to do amazing work at the highest level, like so many people now are?
So I started just being me as my company. There's now 6 of us on payroll, 3 females, 3 males. And everyone, most of the people that I employ have come through the university I went to 15 years ago. And partly the problem is, and they're all great people, and we know who we're getting and what level of, what caliber of person we're getting and their knowledge. But it's a slight problem with the universities in that sense, because they are predominantly white in lighting. It's generalisation, but in lighting, more male than female. I don't know so much about sound, but yeah, that I think is an interesting thing about how we need to meet good people that want to do it and train them up. And we try to always have a placement on the projects that we can. But yeah, where you find those people is an interesting route that we need to still discover that isn't from those universities, maybe. But that's where we tend to go.
Yeah, I think like we've certainly Autograph, we've quite often tended to look at drama schools and stuff like that. Certainly we've been trying to do, offer more and more placements and looking more at kind of colleges and where people are doing A-levels at that kind of age, and try and just offer as many positions that we can to sort of grow. And at the end of the day, I think there's a massive staffing shortage in this industry right now. Every day my phone's going off with people looking for people. So if anyone knows anyone, please send them my way. We've got but yeah, I think it's trying to make those opportunities, and find people early on in their career to give them the same starts that certainly I started by working in my local amateur theatre. That wouldn't be allowed to happen nowadays with health and safety, to give a 15-year-old kid the keys to the theatre overnight to rig a load of lights and speakers on his own. But to try and what other avenues can we now find to give people those similar opportunities, I guess.
And the thing with the unis is you have to want to. You're going to pay 30, 40, 50,000 pounds to go to it. So you find people that want to do it because that's what you're paying to go there. So it's about trying to find that route of the people that can't afford the 50,000 to go to university, that really want to do fun and interesting projects. And there is availability for companies to have placements or time. It's just how do we meet those people, I guess, is the problem.
Amazing. Should we do some Q&A? Has anyone got any sort of burning question? Here we go. Right up.
It's one question, 2 parts. Do you enjoy going to immersive theatre as an audience member? And what immersive work have you seen that has inspired you, and you can't use your own work?
Can I answer this?
Yeah, please.
I do love going to immersive shows. I hadn't gone to any for years because I'd worked on a bunch of things like Secret Cinema, Swamp Hotel, so I was kind of I was on the inside track, right? So I felt like I knew all the tricks. But then I went to Peaky Blinders. You're going to love this because he worked on Peaky Blinders. But it was fantastic because I went on my own. I didn't know anything about the show, bar that it was based on the TV show. And I had an absolutely brilliant night. And it looked great. It sounded great, everything else. But it was a real pleasure to go and see a show like that and see another way of how they used the space. It was a very clever use of space with set design, sound, music, lighting, the whole lot. And the acting was fantastic. So yeah, I love going to immersive shows now. I try and get to more of them. But yeah, that was the one that brought me back in.
I'm going to answer your question in 2 parts. Do I love going to immersive shows? Yes. Do I love being interacted at by an actor? Absolutely not. I'm the guy. I love watching it. I love watching other people get involved, but I'm always the guy hiding at the back, going, "Please don't talk to me. Please don't talk to me. I'm not going to make eye contact with you." But for me, I take that into my work. So there are people like that who like to come and enjoy. They like the experience, but they actually just want to have a bar, have a drink in a nice bar. So I'm always trying to think, what can we do for the people who are just on the periphery? And without wanting to turn this into a love fest, for me, it was actually Emmet's show, the drop that you did with Swap Motel, which is the one you were talking about with the tiny little speakers, I assume. Really great. And the sound design was really, it was naturalistic. It's like you wouldn't necessarily have known it was there other than the big moments. So.
I dislike being interacted with in immersive things. I don't actually have much time off to go to things, so I don't really go to anything. You become a bit...
You're going to say jaded, aren't you?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, you become a bit jaded. And I think, the problem I have personally is I always judge, and I'll sit there, even in a West End show, and look for the things to improve rather than enjoying the experience.
Yeah, I'm the same. I hate interaction. I can't stand it. So I used to sit at the back, but I really enjoy going to them. For me, I think Stranger Things is probably the one stands out most. But overall, I've never done a secret cinema before, and that was it blew my mind. It was amazing.
New concept, right? Like I think that's the interesting stuff of the things that are coming out now is that there's a lot of companies doing it, and it's very easy for us to pick up the same, and it's a very easy thing to go into, to pick up the same tools and design book and everything else and layer it onto a different show. The interesting thing with that, we were talking about this at lunchtime, and a couple of other things, was like flip it on its head. And Fabian, when we did 28 Days Later, decided, and we all thought he was bonkers at the time, in 2 warehouses to show the films on the roof, and everyone lay on hospital beds with zombies walking around and show
You're doing that a disservice there, because we were due to start building a conventional end-on screening room on the Monday. Andy's just emailed me at 5:00 on Friday with a little hand-drawn sketch of 1,000 camp beds and a screen on the roof. He's like, "Can you call me about this?" And sure enough, Monday morning.
I was sure that was a joke. When I got that email from you, I was sure that was a joke, like an elaborate prank.
But I think it's about flipping it on its head and coming up with, because otherwise everyone's going to keep doing the same thing. And so yeah, coming up with a new thing, which is exactly what Stranger Things was.
But
right?
the beds was actually a triumph. Like, it was an amazing
For sure.
end to the show.
We didn't think it was when we got told it.
Yeah, when we got told it, but when you walked in, and there was it 16 screens?
20 something.
20 something screens on the ceiling and all these hospital beds, and you walked in, you were like, whoa.
I've got 2 tips. Wake the Tiger in Bristol is great. If anyone hasn't been to that yet, the Soap was doing a session before this talking about it, but I've been to that, and that's great. And again, that's got that edgy thing of like, actually, this is something a bit new, a bit different, a bit interesting. The other thing I was going to say is Rumble in the Jungle has just opened up down in Canada Water, which is a Muhammad Ali recreation, and their sort of tagline, cheekily, is secret cinema but for sporting experiences. But that looks really interesting, and that's the one that I want to go and see. If to tell honestly, I haven't been to see it yet, but that's one I'm going to try and go and see in the next couple of weeks, because I think that could be really. They've got really, again, trying to do something a bit different, really interesting twist, trying to recreate a sporting moment, but theatrically, and it's good. It's good, quite fun. I'll go and see that if I were you.
Has anyone worked with responsive audio or lighting, something that responds to participants' behavior? What types of technologies have you used to achieve it, and how did it affect your creative process?
So the stuff we're doing out in Texas at the moment on Potter is that the feedback from the last 2 years was more immersive, more interactive things that people could do. Everyone wants to be able to go up and answer a phone or touch a button, and we've been doing it for years. To that level of answering a phone and having a recording in secret cinema stuff. And now, like the theme parks, like if you go to Universal Florida, everything's interactive with the wands, and every one of those 34 sections has a different element to it, and each one is controlled differently. Some are controlled by people, by performers or interactors that are there. Some are controlled by magnets in wands that they're given. Some are controlled, and each one has a different trigger or method of triggering. As a member of the public, you would never know that there's any difference in any of them. But it's about what we're learning is they're pushing 250,000 people through that over 2.5 months, and it has to be stable and reliable, which is where the theme park element is now coming in more and more, and the balance of indoor immersive, outdoor immersive, theme park. Yeah, lots of different things. The video stuff's triggered, and then within that show control minefield, we're mostly always triggered via sound, but either we were talking about this last week, video trigger sound trigger us, or there's a foot pedal, or the interesting thing that's coming out now is more technology with phones and how we can make people's phones react whilst they're on a experience in a trail, whether it's vibrate, whether the torch turns on and off, whether there's an image that comes up. So it's about that level of putting people within the moment, basically.
I think, yeah, just to add now, I think something that kind of builds on that, particularly what you say about kind of responsive technology. Yeah, interactive technology, buttons, hidden buttons on set for the audience to respond to. We do that a lot. But the kind of responsive technology is a really exciting thing, and something, fortunately they're talking about this right now downstairs with Peaky Blinders. Something we did working with Clockwork Dog. And so Sam, correct me if I get any of this wrong. They're out there if you want to chat to them. We built a lot of gameplay into the set in Peaky Blinders because our theory was, well, we spend sometimes millions of pounds on this set. Why don't we make the set do some stuff? Because we can never afford to have enough actors, because actors are very expensive. It's a weekly running cost. So yeah, we built in kind of those kind of elements of gameplay and that responsive, like lots of safe cracking games and stuff. But I think also working on the escape room stuff that I've been involved in with Path Entertainment, we're building in slowly but surely more responsive tech as well. I mean, one game on the Monopoly life size that's on Tottenham Court Road that I think comes to mind is there's an exercise bike and it's a courier delivery and you have to deliver the different parcels, and the speed at which you get there is based on how quick you cycle on the bike. And essentially what that's doing is, through the COG software, is it's basically changing the playback speed of the video, and it's at certain thresholds triggering different levels of sound so that it gets faster and faster. And I think that's a kind of really exciting thing as we kind of learn more and more about that technology. It's becoming more and more accessible, is building more of that in. I know there's a partner that I work with in LA who told me about an escape room they'd done, where one of the things that you had to put a heart monitor on and you had to get your heartbeat to a certain speed to complete and move on to the next level of the game. And I think, there's a lot more exciting things that can be done with responsive tech as well as interactive. Yeah.
Just one thing, how does that responsiveness, the incorporating responsiveness, affect the creative process?
I mean, it's thinking about, I suppose you've got to be thinking about how I suppose it's how the audience are going to respond to that.
Outcomes, I think.
Yeah.
Maybe. So it's like we said earlier about being prepared for any eventuality. So like we both would have come to the show with a big folder full of sounds to be able to react to things. So maybe for something like that, like if it's going to respond, let's say it's a game, like a Clockwork Dog game, you can win, lose. So maybe we need to have an option for each of those things. For example.
And different intermediate options.
Yeah, and when you reach a certain level, let's say that there are 3 rounds, that each has its own identity, maybe.
How many different thresholds of sound
so
do you need?
That might be creatively how you think about it as a game, because we could also work with the guys from Clockwork and say, okay, how about if the game did this, and then, and then there's a virus comes in, and then, there's a threat or whatever. So you could start thinking of that creatively, I think.
I think a lot of it comes down to narrative. So certainly for the guys the sort of shows that these guys work in, it's if you're going to have that sort of interactivity, then how does that work within the narrative? Is there a point to it? Does it move the story along? Is it intrinsic to the story, or is it just like a little sideshow kind of, game to play, if that makes sense? There's some really interesting stuff with Connect, body tracking, and media servers. And video media servers now are so fun because there's so many different data, like ways of tracking things and giving sort of data feeds into it, that you can then manipulate everything from video through to sound and lighting, cues, and everything else. There's some really interesting people doing some art pieces that with using that sort of technology, which I find really interesting. What is more interesting is when people haven't seen it done well yet, is can you tell a good story with that? Or is there a good piece of storytelling to do with that tech? Or is it just a bit more of a game?
Swamp Motel do some good stuff, actually. They video the audience as they go through the experience, and then at the end of the experience, they get shown either a photograph or a video of themselves playing the game at the end, and every audience member group gets that video and that personalized touch. And that's quite a cool way of using the tech.
Yeah, the two things. So we're doing a couple of different projects at the moment. One of them is RFID tags through spaces that record that not only responds to headphones and play the language that you pick at the start with information, but also respond and give you photos and information back about your personality at the end and a printout. And then the other thing to say is just about responses. Like we might program for a reward sequence, so someone does something and we might program 20 different sound and lighting solutions as resolutions of the experience. We can trigger any one of those depending on the gameplay or the experience. So we might always trigger the same one and we might never trigger number 19, but we factor that in our end at the start in the control sense. So it's all set up there in the system.
Great. Amazing. Should we go next question along?
So I have a bit of a twofold question. It's the same question, but with slightly two different angles. So the first part is more around kind of job description and how this level of interactivity has changed the way you describe your job. Do you feel that now you had to kind of widen a little bit your kind of area of intervention on production, so kind of not being limited to audio and lighting, but start thinking creatively around the creative tech to build that level of interactivity? The second question is more around process. So the more you start integrating all that interactivity in creative tech, can you talk a bit about kind of the strategies to build show control that includes audio, lighting, but also kind of more DIY custom ecosystems to include the interactivity?
I'll take the first part of that very quickly, which is really easy. We get more companies to come in and deliver that. So I still get to come up with really great creative ideas. And then I'm not a specialist in that side of things. So there are multiple companies that we will work with on those other projects to deliver the right quality and level of detail. So ultimately, I won't talk for Luke, but yeah, from a lighting point of view, we still stick to our lane in that sense and deliver lighting. And if we rely very heavily on the sound department for audio triggers, because most of the experiences and the shows and the trails are all led by sound and chased for other departments. But yeah, if it's interactive, we'll bring in a company to deliver it.
But I would just sort of slightly caveat that with saying, I think that's right from a delivery point of view, but creatively, I think you middle in everything.
Yeah, for sure. You can come up with the ideas. Yes, absolutely, and be involved in that process. But yes, when it comes to delivering it, get some cleverer people.
Yeah, I mean, I think Andy just hit the nail on the head. I think in terms of my wider scope, I definitely feel like, particularly, this is as I've grown in the industry and as a creative, I definitely feel more entitled to. And build relationship with people to, as Andy said, meddle in everything. In terms of the delivery of a project, though, I've actually feel like I've almost maybe, for want of a better term, narrowed my scope a little bit, and that actually, as these shows are becoming so big and so complicated, tend to be splitting stuff out. I'm tending to now employ audio programmers and stuff like that to help, so that I can focus more on the creative, to not be sat there at the laptop doing all the nuts and bolts and the programming and thinking about the ones and zeros and, Adam needs a MIDI cue and, don't want to hold up them and all this kind of jazz. So actually slightly still within the team, because splitting the work up a little bit more and, engaging more people on the team, sort of more program and stuff like this. And, and Adam said as well, widening out the team, bringing on like gameplay designers into like a theatre show and stuff like that to bring on more of that interactivity as well. Because at the end of the day, there's only so many hours in the day and we can't do everything all at once,
On a big show like a Secret Cinema, Luke and I did Stranger Things together. I was creating all the audio content and creating the kind of end sequence and the rest of the world as well. But there was no way that one person could do that. It was so complicated. Luke had designed this 360 sound system with a central cluster that informed me how to create my sounds, but I was giving you massive stems. I mean, I think we ended up with 10 sections in that show, ranging from 6 minutes to 30 seconds maybe or something, but they were all around 4. But if the creatives wanted to make a little change to that, I mean, there's no way you could program it and me cut it and then be ready to go in 10 minutes to do that change, because that's how fast we had to work. We didn't have enough tech. Well, we had a good tech time, but the amount of changes we were doing, we started off with a 40-minute sequence. We whittled it down to 19 minutes, thereabouts, 20 maybe. You do need maybe a wider team sometimes, especially in those big shows.
It just goes back to sitting around the table all together again and coming up with those, like, what do you actually, like, what do you want people to do and experience, and then ultimately how we do it and deliver it and get there is there's a solution for everything, right? Come up with the best thing and then work out how to deliver it in budget.
Have you said, but what's your sort of taking it from your world?
Very much similar to these guys. You specialise in your certain areas. Everyone knows a bit about everything, which like we'll talk about, communicate about. But when it actually comes to it, you have a lighting designer, a lighting programmer, a sound programmer, designer, and then like a show controller. Especially in the theme park world, you literally have a designated person who just does the show control side, who integrate all those systems together. So there's a lot of the pressure of everyone else.
One more question.
Hello? Yes, it's working. Hello, I'm So from Wake the Tiger, by the way, so I will definitely be tracking you down in the bar afterwards. I have lots of questions. But I would like to ask you to go on the other side of the scale of things. We've done the high budget, big stuff, small shows, little budget. Do you have any recommendations of friendly software/hardware combinations for LED shows that requires little coding and ideally connects to sound sources of some kind? So recommendations for those who are doing the small stuff.
Lots of things. I mean, obviously, QLab license is 500 quid and a Mac is 800 quid. If you're looking at even less than that, something which I was doing some R&D on last week, it's like a bright sign player, something like that. You can do stereo audio, schedule it to a time code. They're about 150 quid for an audio only one. And they're pretty easy to program. Or, as we were saying earlier, you can get an MP3 player off Amazon, a 20 quid PC speaker, put some batteries in it, off you go. Kind of only limited by your imagination, really.
I think it's important to say as well that QLab is rentable by the day, and you can rent it to own as well. So it starts from about $5 a day if you just want sound. If you need sound and lighting, I think it's probably $8 or $9. And it will run on your Mac. You don't have to buy a Mac Mini necessarily. If you're doing a small show and you happen to have a 2015 MacBook Pro, it will probably run on that, I would think.
I mean, you can interface with any other third-party stuff, even just a PC running iTunes or something like that and a playlist of files,
Were you wanting LED control as part of it? LED, that's or Seb, what do you use?
I think we use a program years ago called LX. I can't remember what it's called, but it is a free one. And you just buy I think it's a £200 dongle, which is like a USB to DMX dongle. Then you can also use QLab now, the same thing. Now QLab does lighting. So yeah,
the tricky answer to your question is it depends how many universes of control. Like if you want 20 LEDs, really easy, really cheap. If you want, at the moment we're doing 28,000 LEDs for Sandringham for one show, and that control there's still cheaper forms of control. So we use Madrix for that, which is a laptop-based control system, which ultimately you can own because you can buy the laptop and buy the dongle again. So a dongle-based system, effectively, depending on how much control you need.
I think we're at time, everyone. So thank you very much. Really appreciate you being here. I hope that was really useful.